Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, how was Iceland?
Oh, yeah, I guess I was in Iceland for a bit, huh?
That's what your Twitter feed would suggest. There was pictures of that and a lack of arguing. So I
did not argue. Yeah, I took a true break. I actually went on vacation, and by that I don't mean I physically traveled from one place to another. Obviously, I did that, but like I turned off all notifications on Slack, which I haven't done in like 3 years. It was very liberating. I did come back to a couple of messages that I kind of wish I had seen, but whatever. It was very liberating, and I don't know that I got in any fights on Twitter at all while in Iceland. That's 9 days of no fights. That's probably unlikely, but. If I did, they were very short-lived and not very in-depth. So mostly stayed off of Twitter, maybe 3, 4, 8 tweets a day, which is very low for me. Took a lot of pictures. I was actually planning on posting pictures from each day that night, and I never got around to it because I was on vacation. So
because you're actually enjoying yourself and not a part of the hellscape?
Yeah, that's wild. Dude, outside is wild. It's crazy. I don't know if you've ever been there. But
it has moments, right? Like
Yeah. I mean, not in Minnesota right now, but Minnesota before we left, went outside briefly. That was pretty great. I plan on going outside again when the weather permits. But yeah, Iceland, I mean, the weather in Iceland is like not great, but it's not bad either. It's like it stays consistently between like 47 and 52 degrees, and sometimes and there's like light drizzling but never like heavy rain, and I don't know, it ruled. I'll talk more about like the Iceland specific stuff when we have that question in the mailbag, but when I came back I actually tried, I just posted like the 18 pictures or whatever, and I tried not to talk about it too much, but I hung out with friends immediately after, got into a football argument immediately. I went to Prize Brewing with a couple of friends, and someone was like, if the Titans trade for Julio Jones, I think they'll become contenders. And I couldn't have it with that take. That take sucks. So I argued with them.
So what you're saying is you went out to Iceland to rehab for a bit. You came back and you
immediately.
Fell. Yeah, immediately.
Yeah. And then
that first step is the hardest.
Yeah, and then they asked me about Iceland, so I talked about it. But I try not to be the person that talks about like, I went to Europe and it changed my life. Everyone should go backpacking. No, but if you can afford Iceland, which is a heftier proposition than I had imagined, that place is expensive. Yeah, I'd recommend it. That place rules.
So, again, patreon.com/Norse Code for your donation and Iceland dollars. Welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We have stuff to talk about. We have a couple of signings. We have some training camp stuff, a draft trade that didn't happen, and a pretty good mailbag. But before we start, just want to thank you guys very much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoyed last episode, where we just gave out a Patreon episode for free, go over to patreon.com/Norse Code and join us over there. We have plenty of bonus content. The people over there are getting 2 episodes this month of bonus stuff. One is going to be draft stuff, and another is going to be more of outtake discussions. Maybe a little bit of race of the race norming discussion, depending on how much I can prune around that conversation that we had before the show today. But lots of good stuff that you can access, again, over at patreon.com/Norse Code. You can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code as well in order to make a one-time donation. Also, we do have the Threadless store open. That's norsecode.threadless.com. We don't see very much money from it, but if you would like to support the show, you can get a shirt. You can get, the baby onesie has always been popular. I don't know if they're selling the masks for cheap yet, but that might be a thing that you would desire from the art designed by Drawplay Dave. But if you'd like to go over to there, you can go to norsecode.threadless.com. Hey, we got a bunch of people over on Patreon this week, so I just want to shout out to them real quick. Had a couple of notes as well. Over to DJ Durham, says, "Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know that releasing a bonus episode to Spotify worked because now you have my tree fitty. Spend it wisely or put it towards a Colts Carson Wentz jersey or some Seahawks swag for Arif. I haven't been listening for that long, but I love the show. Keep it up.
It sounds like he's been listening to the show long enough to know that there is a dichotomy between spending it wisely and spending it on Seahawks swag.
Well, it's still, I mean, I've heard of worse things that it could be. Spending money to annoy you is still it's still good money being spent. So I appreciate that, if nothing else. A couple other people, Alex KP, thank you. Jonathan Curry, thank you. Sean Noonan, thank you. Michael Lacoste says, hey, I just started listening, and my reaction was, what the hell what have I been missing out on? Thanks for the awesome episodes, and keep the laughs rolling. Thank you, Michael.
This is the most interesting stuff to me. People who tune into the show for like the first time or whatever and love it.
Yep.
I don't understand. There's like an hour of beekeeping content. Like, I'm glad. I love that people enjoy the show. It's the only way the show would exist, right?
Yep.
But I feel like I guess the good news is we're not like so stocked up with like inside jokes and bits you have to like go back 80 episodes for, and it still is good. But
there's
like,
a number of them, but yes.
Yeah. Like sometimes I look at like what this back half of the show is, and it's all like, yeah, for Arif's corner. Hey, I'm thinking about building a corner in my corner office. And I'm just like, what are we doing, man?
Well, you've said before that that other podcasts have been, fun to do, but this ends up being the show that like where you can talk football on. But this ends up being the show where you like can talk about what you want to talk about, and sometimes that's your corner. So thank you, Michael. Also, Dan Mack, thank you so much. And finally, we have a question from Mason Beck. I'm just going to adjust the mic here, adjust the setup, and just read this for Arif, who has not heard this yet.
What is this?
So from Mason Beck, he says, apologize if this is long, but I feel like it's important. Hi, another longtime listener finally repenting for my sins with a subscription. What finally pushed me over the edge was finally getting an adult job, but more importantly, to answer a question posed on a recent podcast, which asked if there were any other teams out there with a similar heartbreaking background to the Vikings. Luckily, I have a roommate who's very into Mexican soccer, and I have learned the answer.
Oh.
Cruz Azul. They are one of the big four teams in Mexican soccer, though what separates them from the rest of the group is that they have not had much recent success and are known for their uncanny ability to lose games that they are expected to win in crushing ways.
Oh, hell yeah.
The most recent example was during last year's playoffs, in which the team won their first match against the Pumas 4-0, meaning all they would have to do is not get shut out by 4 goals in the next match to advance. Well, that's exactly what happened.
Well.
And that was something that had never happened before. Incredibly, this type of event happens in Mexico, or happens so often that Mexican soccer fans came up with a word for when this team falls below expectations in such a way. It's a Cruzazulear. Here is the definition given in a tweet by the Mexican Academy of Language. The verb Cruzazulear is
a Mexican Academy of Language?
Yeah.
My word.
It's a neologism from Mexican Spanish that refers to the action of losing a game after having the victory practically assured. Such has been the impact of this voice in our country that it is currently used in other areas but other than sports. Not only this, the team recently hired a curandera, or a practitioner of folk medicine, to purify the stadium of bad energy. After learning this, I cannot help but feel a kinship with the Cruz Azul fans, and will now refer to all Viking heartbreaks as Cruzazulears.
All right, so
the question is, can you think of a better nickname for Vikings failures?
I mean, that's amazing. There is one problem here, though. I imagine there's at least one listener who's familiar with Mexican soccer, so they've probably already identified the issue here, which I found out by going to Cruz Azul's Wikipedia page. It's not like I'm that familiar with Mexican soccer. So the first thing I found was like it's very in keeping with the theme, and I loved it. In May of 2020, Guillermo Billy Alvarez Cuevas, then president of the club, was indicted by Mexican authorities on multiple accounts of insurance fraud, racketeering, extortion, tax evasion, and money laundering. So far, so good, at least in terms of like the hilarious patheticness of this organization, right? I love it. Right? That feels like something that might happen to the Vikings. I mean, even like Ziggy Wilf got like sued in New Jersey court, right, for real estate chicanery. But problem on May 30th, so like 8 days ago, they won the Premier Division. They finished their 23-year championship drought by winning. So
immediately this has to be disqualified then because they had success.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, and it was 8 days ago. I don't know when this.
What day did that cut? What day was that? That was the 20.
It was May 30th, 2021.
I got this message on May 18th. So.
Brutal. That was a real Cruzazulear question.
That is too funny.
Yeah.
Oh,
that question fell apart at the end.
Yeah, when we got the message, your vacation ruined this whole thing. Your vacation.
I lifted the curse.
Your vacation lifted the curse of the Cruzazulears.
Oh my god, that's funny. So we can't use it.
Nope, that's too bad.
Yeah, I feel like there are across sports. There's just like, I mean, up until Clemson actually won the Natty, I mean, they were known for Clemsoning, right?
Oh, absolutely,
yeah. But yeah, we can't. We don't really have it in baseball anymore, right? Because the Red Sox won, the Cubs won.
Yep, the Cubs won, and that kind of eliminated everything. Red Sox didn't even have as long of a drought as the Cubs. So yeah,
and Liverpool won pretty recently. So they were a really good example of a team that was like way underperforming, hadn't won a championship, I think, since the Premier League had started, but then they won like 1 or 2 years ago.
So the moral of the story here is the Vikings just eventually have to win one and just call it good. Fantastic.
I mean, it would make sense if the Vikings were like the lone standout of this group.
Well, I don't think anyone would be surprised. No.
Right. Yeah.
All right. But anyway, thank you, Mason Beck, for providing us with that global information that made us laugh there. All right. Before we get to the actual show itself, we have news, live show stuff. Looks like we're going to be doing a live show in Minneapolis this year in August for Week 1 against the Denver Broncos. So if you are interested in such a thing, pay attention to the next couple of episodes. We will have more information. I'm looking at getting a venue. We appear to have a special guest or two lined up. So just keep listening. We'll have more information as to when that ends up happening. So we've been trying to do a thing for training camp for the last couple of years. It's about time that we finally sit down, do it. The time is now. Children are our future. Let's do this. So we'll be doing that probably the Wednesday or the Thursday before the game, which is on the Saturday. So I believe that's going to be August 12th. But we'll look into that in a couple of weeks with more definitive information. Just wanted to let you guys know that this was something that was going to happen. So let's get into the actual show itself. So it's after June 1st. Did anything really change in the NFL for the Vikings? Like, what's the cap situation like?
So the Vikings ended up generating a bit more cap space just by the nature of the way they cut Kyle Rudolph. They used a post June 1st designation when they cut him, and so his like an additional amount of money comes off the books for him for the Vikings. So they gained cap space. If you look at over the cap, it says the Vikings have about $13 million, a little bit more than that in cap space. That does not include the Bashad Breeland contract, which I believe is like $4 million or something like that. And so we have to account for that. So the Vikings really more likely have something like $9 million, but they have signed most of their draft class, including, I want to say, Christian Darrisaw. So they are free to use that both as a buffer. And they did sign Christian Darrisaw. So they're free to use that $9 million, however they please. Don't have to worry about saving it for their draft class. So they probably will save $3, $4, $5 million as a buffer, but they could use the additional $4 million to sign somebody else. And I'm sure people would be really excited if they signed somebody like, Geno Atkins or something. Maybe there's an edge rusher on the market to kind of fill out or have insurance in case Daniel Hunter doesn't play. But yeah, they've got a little bit of room. Maybe they even sign a wide receiver 3. I don't know. But yeah, it's a much healthier cap situation than I think a lot of us expected. from the beginning of the offseason back in March or even in January when we were trying to project how that offseason would look. Now they've got a ton more cap space. Some of it includes like tricks like when they converted some years of the Anthony Barr contract into void years. Some of it was a little bit of restructuring. Some of it was like creative signing. But yeah, they've got a decent amount. Whether or not they've used it correctly, that's obviously a different debate. But yeah, the cap situation looks pretty clean.
So there's been a bit of talk about Danielle Hunter wanting to have a restructure. Is there any sort of news on that? This is the sort of time. This is the time of year that when little things like this end up getting done. But this is also the time of year that there's threats of people get threatened about holding out, and people get threatened as far as like getting fined for not showing up to camp. Because according to Schefter, they could start fining Aaron Rodgers for sitting at home or sitting in Hawaii now.
Well, they have to. League rules require that you fine the players now. So it used to be that, which I don't know if that was in. I don't think that was in the most recent, or I think that's in the most recent CBA that was just signed this last.
So it used to be at the team's discretion as to whether or not they actually had to do it.
Yeah, and so part of the negotiations almost always included forgiving the fines. But yeah, now it can't be part of the negotiation. Now teams are required to fine those players. So if Danielle Hunter's not at a mandatory camps, he'll receive fines. And so that's what tests the commitment of a player first and foremost. After that, like with the Le'Veon Bell stuff, we had to see whether or not he was comfortable losing an accrued year and all that. But yeah, with Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure he is comfortable with all of that, just because he's earned enough money both in terms of his, football contract and his endorsement deals that it's not going to be as big. And I don't think that the biggest thing he's looking for necessarily, I mean, I'm sure his agent will negotiate for as much money as possible. So I'm not saying that that's not part of it, but I don't think it's a purely money motivated move from Aaron Rodgers. I think he's looking for stuff that
anyone who thinks this is a money or a pure money situation is an idiot. There's no.
I can't imagine that it is. Yeah, exactly.
Money can have something to do with it. Money is not everything here.
Right. Yeah. Like if he ends up becoming the highest paid, quarterback again in football, that wouldn't shock me. But I don't think, his concern right now, the reason that he's holding out has anything to do with whether or not he's getting paid enough. Yeah, I think everyone understands that. So, So when mandatory workouts start, that's when we'll see kind of how players kind of respond to that. But yeah, Danielle Hunter wants more money because he's grossly underpaid for his level of capability to produce. He also wants some security, right, because of the risk of injury. So, whether or not the Vikings are comfortable with that, given the most recent injury history thing with him, I don't know. That's going to be fascinating to track. But I think everybody kind of understands that Danielle Hunter is pretty important to the way that defense operates. So I think. I don't know. He doesn't have quite the same leverage as Aaron Rodgers, right? Not just because he's not a quarterback, but because he just doesn't have that second income flow that Aaron Rodgers does through endorsements. I mean, I'm sure he's got some, but it's not the same level of money. And because he was underpaid, he's got a little bit less to absorb the cushion. Although I think it's pretty unlikely that $100,000 is going to be that big a deal if you've been earning $14 million a year for like 3-4 years, even after taxes. So we'll see. But how OTAs kind of plays out is going to be kind of the most fascinating thing from that perspective. We've missed some other players at OTAs, but some of them came back. Like Cameron Dancer, for example, showed up at the second OTAs. That's something to keep in mind.
So let's talk about a couple of signings, because the Vikings have not necessarily been quiet on the defensive end and the corner market. But first, let's talk about Bashard Breeland from the Chiefs, because we need more corners. Well, someone believes we need more corners.
Yeah, I mean, the more corners, the better, right? Bashard Breeland, he's kind of interesting. I kind of want to dig into his film a little bit more before and his scouting report will be over at The Athletic, along with the scouting reports of every other player in training camp when the training camp guide gets released in a month. But yeah, he's one of the more interesting ones I kind of want to dig into because super penalty prone, which actually Patrick Peterson was over the last 2 years. So that could be kind of something to watch out for because that's something that Cameron Dancer, that was a concern people had of his coming out of college. We've seen a lot of penalties come from Peterson and Breland over the past 2 years, and so it could be very penalty heavy defense, which is a problem. But Zimmer's worked with penalty prone cornerbacks his entire career, like Trey Waynes, Xavier Rhodes, really great, examples of players that in college were very penalty prone or played a style that seemed like it would translate into a lot of penalties. And in some of those, in some of the years that they've been really good, you haven't had to worry about that. So we'll see kind of how that translates. But yeah, really great last year in terms of his ability to prevent the deep ball, Bashad Breeland, and not as strong intermediate or short, but not bad either. His numbers look pretty good from like a yards per coverage snap allowed or reception per coverage snap allowed, but those penalties kind of hurt his PFF coverage grade, so he never is at the top of the PFF grades or anything like that. Plus, he hasn't had a ton of value for NFL teams, it seems. Like he signs these 1-year deals, he doesn't make a ton of money, the team doesn't re-sign him, and so it seems like he might be a situational corner at best, so the penalties get too much. We'll see. There's talent there, right? And it'll be interesting to see if it's unlockable. We have a bunch of questions about Bashad Breeland in the mailbag, so I'll answer those when we get there. But that is an interesting signing, even if he doesn't end up making the starting 11 or anything like that. It's certainly an interesting one.
There was also another one, Cole Cabral from the Texans, who I believe it was looking at playing as center.
Yeah, so he signed as a center as an undrafted free agent for the Rams last year, and he didn't strike me as like a very good NFL fit for any scheme really. He's an undersized center, but he doesn't have as much agility or athleticism as you would expect from somebody who's an undersized center. And so you go to a scheme, if you're an undersized center, you typically go to a scheme that runs a lot of wide zone, like the Rams and like the Vikings. And so kind of where he's been picked up makes a lot of sense, but he just doesn't really have the movement capability that you typically expect of somebody like that. Plus, he isn't necessarily strong for size either. 295 pounds, and I think pretty tall for a center too. And he just doesn't anchor very well. He doesn't have a lot of punch, and he doesn't move very well. So you kind of ask what he figures out. So if you take a look at the scouting reports from the 2020 draft, it talks about his like football IQ, how high it is. And how he does a really great job setting protections and making sure that the rest of the offensive line's in focus. But that one's kind of a curious one. It seems like the Rams and the Vikings probably disagree with some of these scouting reports on how athletic he is. They'd have to for them to consider him a good enough fit. But yeah, I wouldn't expect him. I mean, because the Rams already cut him, the Texans already cut him. I wouldn't expect him to make the roster, especially after. The Vikings, traded for Mason Cole, and they grabbed an interior guy in the draft, and Wyatt Davis, or grabbed another tackle in the draft. So I doubt it, but they need to kind of fill out the camp roster, and it's not surprising that after a year where there just weren't any undrafted free agents, that you pull from the undrafted free agent pool from the prior year.
Also, Amari Henderson is somebody who was signed from rookie camp.
Yeah. So he was one of the 5 tryout players or something, which, they used to have like 30 tryout players, but new rules this year for the number of tryout players you can have. The Vikings already signed Evan Kazarchik, I think is how you pronounce his name. I looked at a pronunciation guide. A tackle who I think is like native to Minnesota. He's from Minnesota. But it was initially reported that they would sign Amari Henderson. That hadn't happened. Now it's been officially announced that they signed Amari Henderson. He's kind of curious too, because he was a 168 pounds when he played for the Jaguars. So he was on their practice squad. This is reporting from Chris Thomason at the Pioneer Press. He's on the practice squad and played 168 pounds. According to Thomason, he's now 188 pounds. He's built kind of, added a lot more muscle. Hopefully he's kind of kept some quickness, because he didn't have a ton of room there to lose. Like, he wasn't slow or anything like that. But, if you gain, 20 pounds, you're likely to lose some quickness unless you do it in a very smart way. And he kind of needed that quickness in order to compete. But he's kind of in the Vikings mold. He had a ton of pass deflections in college, which is very reminiscent of Jeff Gladney and Cameron Dantzler and Harrison Hand and all the guys that they've grabbed the past 2 years in the draft and even undrafted free agency, guys that just have had a ton of pass deflections, relatively speaking. Ian Scott again. So this is not somebody again that I've personally scouted a lot, but Ian scouting reports, the things that have come up about him are, issues with the size, of course, and that he's much more of a zone corner with really great recognition skills and really great closing speed than a man corner that's got turn and run speed. And then they also, in addition to getting Bashad Breeland and Amari Henderson, they also signed Ty Smith, a cornerback from Towson. That's it. And he was not a particularly fast corner in college. He's another kind of like zone guy. He's got a lot more length than Amari Henderson. So, he probably projects to be in the outside, especially because he's not incredibly quick. Like he's kind of fluid for his size. He's not incredibly fast. But in college, he showed that, he's got instincts. And he's a small school guy, right? Towson. So you can't always really tell if his game translates, but he's been bouncing around the league since 2015. So there's a pretty decent chance that that he can kind of hold up. He certainly will be kind of good to have as like as a camp body. But I wouldn't expect him to make the roster. I mean, his lack of speed is certainly a pretty big concern. I mean, I think he ran like a 4.6 at his pro day or at the combine or something like that. And he also was like one of those corners that was always like pretty lanky and undersized. So he's somebody that needed to add size, but he showed pretty good instincts in zone coverage. He's got click and close ability, and has been bouncing around the league for a while. I think he showed up against Kevin White when West Virginia played Towson. I think that's kind of like the thing that made people interested in him way back like 6 years ago. He's another guy that I would consider a camp body. It is kind of interesting how many corners that they've signed. Like they're just like chock full of them now. I guess we'll see. Unlike all the other cornerbacks that they've grabbed recently, he did not have a college career just stuffed with pass deflections like Amari Henderson and Jeff Gladney and so on. But 8 million corners.
I think you could argue there might be too many.
There could be. I don't know. Like you take a look at this cornerback depth chart, and they could cut like half of them. Like it's nuts, right? Because you got Patrick Peterson, Harrison Hand, Dylan Mabin, Perry Nickerson, Ty Smith, Chris Boyd, Bashad Breeland, Jeff Gladney, Cameron Dantzler, Mackenzie Alexander. So that's 10. And even if you say, hey, Jeff Gladney, he's going to start off the season on like the commissioner exempt list, you don't have to worry about him, right? I've already moved Cameron Bynum to safety in this, by the way, so you don't have to worry about that. And Dylan Mabin, he's going to get cut. Perry Nickerson's going to get cut. And Ty Smith's going to get cut, right? That still leaves you with 6. That's a lot, right? Patrick Peterson, Harrison Hand, who's been having pretty good OTAs according to the highlights. I haven't been to OTAs yet, right? But then you have to add in Cameron Dantzler, Bashad Breeland, Mackenzie Alexander, and then you have to ask, like, what are you going to do with maybe Chris Boyd, right? He's been around for a while. He's a good special teamer, and he knows the system. And there's just not a lot of veterans, right? Like, obviously, you've got Patrick Peterson, and Mackenzie Alexander now counts as a veteran. But there's, it's Jeff Gladney and Cameron Dantzler and Harrison Hand are your primary, up and coming guys, and you don't have a lot of people that know the system. So, I find it kind of interesting how many corners they have. At least they'll enter training camp with safeties this time. Last year they had like 3.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about OTAs because that's there's been plenty of pictures on Twitter of Kirk Cousins doing a very interesting dance or like leap into an end zone or something. So just what's been going on in OTAs? What have you been hearing?
So again, I haven't been yet, right? But I've been following along a little bit. Kirk Cousins has a little bit of speed to his game, I guess, is like the way that they put it.
Obviously, he's a dual threat.
Yeah, dual threat quarterback Kirk Cousins, 4-star recruit. I mean, we've seen Harrison Hand's name pop up a couple of times. We've seen a lot of defensive names come up, and which that could be a good or a bad thing, right? It's always difficult to tell when you're playing yourself, but yeah, I mean the primary story has been about Danielle Hunter. There's been questions about, hey, why aren't the rookie tackles and guards playing with the first team yet, right? Because I think even in the most recent OTAs, it was Rashad Hill at left tackle, and it wasn't Dakota Dozier, was it? It was a group of veterans. So Wyatt Davis was on the second team. Christian Darrisaw was on the second team. And I don't have a problem with that. Like, I think midway through camp, if that's still the case, then you've got some concerns. But the primary issue right now is that the Vikings, like the primary job is to make the team ready. And so even if you project, that this tackle and this guard will end up becoming starters, you don't want to hold back practice for everybody else while they figure it out, right? You want your first team reps to run as smoothly as possible, as often as possible, so that everybody else on the first team can take advantage of those reps, and you don't have to worry about every play getting blown up because the assignments are wrong. So I don't have a huge issue with that. I think people getting concerned about that is a little much, but those have been the stories. I haven't paid a ton of attention to what the wide receiver depth chart behind Thielen and Jefferson looks like. I think Chad Beebe is getting the most wide receiver 3 snaps, but I wouldn't say that that's going to be set in stone or anything like that. So yeah, it's OTAs. From a performance perspective, there's not a ton to learn. I think seeing some cornerback highlights has been fun. We'll see if there's some more on Wednesday when that happens. But yeah, I mean, it's OTAs.
It is OTAs. It cannot be anything but OTAs at this point. Well, it's good to see. It's good to see people running around and Kirk Cousins attempting to do whatever that was.
It's good to have fun.
It is good to have fun. He did look like he was enjoying himself. So I don't mean to poke too hard of fun at him. It was just he's about as square as a 90-degree angle. So
yeah, I mean, if there's a neon sign that said "make fun of me," I mean, he'd be the one having it, right? He'd be the one wearing it.
Yeah,
he invites it.
But he was having fun, so good on him. He was able to go in untouched. So good for him. Well, there was some interesting news that had happened over the past week or so that requires just a bit of a look at, just because of some of the accusations that have been kind of brought in, or like, why was this a thing? Why wasn't it a thing? And it's a bit about the trade that didn't happen during the draft, where the Vikings made an offer to Carolina in order to move into the top 10, probably to pick up Justin Fields, but this didn't end up happening. And some people have looked at this trade that didn't happen as, why didn't the Vikings try to sweeten the deal? Others have looked at it and said the Vikings are making offers on trades all the time, or like trying to see what it would cost to move up for just about anything. What has been your take on this story?
The idea that the Vikings just kind of put it out there is that's weird to me. I don't like So we'll put it in the show notes. There's a video going around from the Panthers hype video surrounding the draft about when they drafted J.C. Horn, which I don't think was a spectacular pick, but I guess I don't have a huge problem with it. And part of that video includes when the Vikings called, and I think we can say not supposedly, right? Like one might have been able to argue, hey, it's kind of weird editing. They go from "it's Minnesota" to revealing the offer, but they did talk about picks that the Vikings have, pick 90 and pick 143, and presumably, of course, pick number 14. And so that seemed to be what the Vikings offered. The Panthers essentially hung up on it, and the reason I don't think that I don't think it's the Vikings were just kind of testing the waters is like, what if the Panthers say yes? Do you just say, never mind, I just wanted to see what you would say? Like, that's not going to happen, right? Like, the Vikings don't put that offer in without an idea of what they're going to do. So I kind of doubt it. I think the Vikings had a plan. So if it wasn't for the fact that I have seen multiple reports from multiple reporters, Courtney Cronin being the first one, I think, on this, saying that the Vikings were attempting to get specifically Justin Fields, I would be skeptical that this was for Justin Fields, just because what they offered does not scream trade up to number 8 for a quarterback. If you take a look for trades into the top 10 for a quarterback, like the Patrick Mahomes trade, trading up, the Chiefs trading up to 10, or I think the Josh Rosen trade, I think that was a trade from the Cardinals to trade up. But if you take a look at trades up into the top 10, teams almost always overpay when it's a quarterback, right? If you take a look at the Rich Hill trade chart and take a look at historical trade values, that chart is really, really good at draft day trades for non-quarterbacks. But when it's a quarterback, the cost tends to be much higher. And the Vikings offered below value of the Rich Hill chart. Now, if you take a look at it in terms of some of the other trade charts out there, like the Jimmy Johnson chart, they're well below value. That's fine, whatever. No one uses that. I mean, everyone says they use the chart, but the Rich Hill chart tracks better with the most recent, decade of trades than the Jimmy Johnson chart does. But if you take a look at charts like PFF's chart, which is derived off of the historical wins above replacement you get at each pick, or the Chase Stewart chart, which is derived off of the approximate value, which is a Pro Football Reference measure off of each pick, then the Vikings offered above value. But that's not the chart people use to trade. That's just a chart that tells you essentially if a team does not have 100% confidence with it, which they shouldn't have, how should they be doing things, which is not really all that relevant when evaluating, how other teams perceive these picks. But Carolina hangs up on them, right? And I find that interesting because the Vikings very clearly had much, much more ammo, right? Because pick 90 and pick 143, those were like the bottom of their respective rounds. Like the Vikings eventually traded 143 to the Jets as part of like the kickback on the trade down from 14 to 23, right? That's where they drafted Diddersaw. Yeah, I would normally find it really hard to believe that it was Justin Fields, but I really trust the fact that there were multiple reports, not just Courtney's, who I think that would be enough on its own, but multiple reports that the Vikings were attempting to trade up for Justin Fields, and that they were also interested in Rashawn Slater. Like if they couldn't get Fields, they would trade up for Rashawn Slater, which is I don't like trade ups. That's one of the few where I wouldn't, gripe about it too much. But yeah, if the Vikings had offered, I had it up too. If the Vikings had offered, was it pick 78, I think, which is 59 points on the Rich Hill chart, as well as pick 14, they would have gotten a lot closer. And then also instead of pick 143, pick 125. I think the Vikings were expecting the Panthers to counter. And I think that's why they offered a lowball offer, right? Because they would have been open to negotiating up, right? So it seems like a lowball offer because we heard the initial offer. But the reality of these trades is that you don't go in with, the most that you would pay, right? Because you should expect that, team is going to try to negotiate up with you. And so the Rich Hill trade chart incorporates the negotiating process, and the video we saw only included the beginning of that process. I think the Vikings expected to be negotiated up and that they expected to pay the kind of the normal amount. Because if you take a look at the Rich Hill trade chart, for the 14th pick, the 78th pick, and the 125th pick is virtually identical. It's like 2 points off, virtually identical to the value to move up from 14 to 8. And so I think that's what they were expecting, and they were probably willing to pay a little bit more than that. Obviously, there was some negotiation involved. Otherwise, Carolina wouldn't have been able to say with confidence that the Vikings did not want to trade their future first. That is kind of curious to me. If it's a quarterback, I just feel like you should do that. But future firsts are discounted so much in trades, like they get treated basically like second-round picks, and that's a disgusting discount. So I can see why the Vikings don't do it, but it is a quarterback. So I think they should have done it. It's going to open them up to criticism for a long time. If Justin Fields ends up being a good quarterback and he's going to be cost controlled for the first 4 or 5 years of his contract, that's going to just be kind of it's a much bigger one than like Aaron Rodgers falling past the Vikings twice, right? Because at least they had a quarterback that, was coming off an MVP season. In this case, like Cousins is like good-ish, he's fine. But like you have to worry a lot more about the cost situation and the fact that, there's been an open discussion about whether or not this is going to be the end of Cousins' career. So I know it's kind of interesting. I saw some people complain that it was unprofessional for the Panthers to release that video. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know what the norms or rules on this are. I mean, the Cowboys have tweeted out their own draft board sometimes. Like, it's kind of wild.
Ethical questions as far as NFL draft stuff is concerned where do you even rank that necessarily? Like, how do you mock draft NFL like ethical questions?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think this gets in the first round of unethical NFL draft stuff. I mean, like, the stuff that's the worst is like when anonymous scouts leak stuff about like, yeah, that guy, I don't like him. He grew up in a single parent family. All women raised him. Those kids are soft. Which I wish I was making that one up, but that was the one I think it was for Marshall Yonda, which that aged well.
Yeah, between that and race norming, it's
Jesus Christ.
Nothing is everything at this point is to be believed as scandalous and dumb. But let's just go over and hit the mailbag, because we were talking about the cornerbacks here just a minute ago. So Ben Olson asks, what do you think about the current cornerback depth chart on what that looks like? I've seen Breland anywhere between 2 and 5.
I don't 2. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying that you're wrong, by the way, Ben. I fully believe that you've seen that. I'm just kind of curious who said it. No, I mean 1 and 2 are Patrick Peterson, Cameron Dantzler. I think that's pretty clear. And I would imagine that Mackenzie Alexander is the leader in the clubhouse for the nickel spot. I don't think that they had a role for him envisioned when they signed him. Because a week before he actually ended up signing, he walks away from Minnesota, and I think he talked about wanting a starting job or something like that, and how frustrating it was that he didn't get one, right? I'm sure I'll take a look at Sam Ekstrom's article at Zone Coverage. I'm sure he covers it, but he really wanted to have a kind of a starting role offered to him, and he walked away from Minnesota after the visit, not getting one. And so I don't think the Vikings envisioned him as a starter, because I think he would have signed right away, even if it was still for $4 million, because it would have been a 1-year contract, and if he played well enough, he'd be able to parlay that into a much bigger contract. So I don't think that he's going to be a lock for CB2, but I think what it means is that, I think Patrick Peterson, obviously, I think the Vikings are going to essentially not hand him the starting job, but are going to act as if it's his, and it would take a lot for him to lose it. But I think beyond that, I think they're actually really open to the idea of a competition between Dantzler and Breland. I don't think Breland would win that competition, and I think Dantzler's most likely going to be ahead on that, but I think that that's something they'd be open to. But I think they just signed a corner because they've had to play. God, I don't even remember, like Dylan Mabin and Chris Jones, and they've gone down to cornerback 6 so many times in the past several years. And I don't know, who was it that was like tortured by Green Bay? Was it Chris Boyd? I think. Just like over and over again.
Enough corners played for the Vikings last year that it's hard for me to remember all of them, because like even a Google search, you'd have to go, I don't know if that's the complete list.
Yeah, well, and this kind of reminds me of the season where they were playing who's the street free agent? Oh my God, this is not a helpful anecdote at all if I can't even remember the name. Because like the first thing that came up was Greg Camarillo, but A, he's a receiver. B, he was actually kind of cool. But Benny Sapp, that's it. Benny Sapp. My God. Yeah. And then they promoted Andrew Sandeo from the practice squad, and a bunch of places had him listed as a corner because, maybe he's going to have to play corner. But yeah, that like last year reminded me of that, when you ended up playing like Chris Jones and all of these nobodies that really did not establish that they should have stayed on the team or anything like that. Like it was really brutal last year, and they've been doing it kind of every year where they've had to go deep into their depth because Mark Fields played a little bit. The guy, another cornerback from Kansas City. Harrison Hand had some play, which was not ideal. But yeah, they went through the whole thing. They had Cameron Dancer, Holton Hill, and Chris Boyd, and Jeff Gladney, and Mark Fields, and Dylan Mabin. I think it's Dylan Mabin. The other one's Greg Mabin. He played for the Jaguars, I think. But yeah, so I think part of the reason that they signed Breland is because it's just good to have corners. I don't think they've got a role in for him in mind yet. I think that they're going to figure that out. So no, I don't know yet. If I was going to guess, I'd say he's the first backup. But he very well could win a job away from Dancer, or they could do. I mean, and they've done this before, right? Where they've had 4, pseudo like starting-ish corners, right? Because they had Mackenzie Alexander and Terrence Newman trade off with Trey Waynes and Xavier Rhodes, right? And so they could have just 4 corners that they sub in and out, or they like this matchup more than that matchup or something.
Next question is from Ryan, who asks, how much do you think Breland's signing is to hedge in case Dantzler doesn't continue progressing? Dantzler sitting out OTAs seems concerning.
Yeah, I don't know why Dantzler missed the first OTA, but he showed up at the second one. So I would imagine it's either family related or injury related, and not what would he be able to hold out for? He's a rookie. Legally, they can't even change his contract. So I would imagine it's injury related or like some sort of family emergency or something. So I'm not too worried about that, especially if he participated in the second OTA, which he did. But yeah, it's fine to hedge. I think the bigger thing is that Dancer was hurt 3 times last year. And he's a guy that coming out of the draft, everyone was concerned that his frame would lead to injuries, and I don't know if it did, but he got injured, right, a number of times. So I don't think it's necessarily to hedge in case he doesn't continue progressing, although that's a good idea. I think it's because they just can't rely on his availability yet.
Yeah, maybe.
Only got hurt 3 times.
Well, is there another good reason why he'd be sitting out?
I mean, I haven't seen the reporting on it, so I could be just missing something entirely. But we don't get to pull players aside anymore. I shouldn't say we because I wasn't there. But the media doesn't get to pull players aside anymore and ask. So they would probably, in theory, they would have asked him after the second OTA. When they asked Diggs when he missed one OTA, they were like, "Why'd you miss?" And he said, "For family emergencies," which seems a lot less true now that we've seen the whole situation with Diggs play out. But we've seen players miss OTAs before, like Kyle Rudolph missed OTAs, and it turns out he was doing like a charity golf event, right? So like I think it was like the NFLPA Walter.
Yeah, people roasted him for playing golf, and then it turned out it was something through the NFL, and it was like a fundraising thing. And I don't know if many people apologize, but they did try to roast him on it.
Yeah, well, so I asked why he was gone, and I was told it was for a golf event. So I tweeted out golf event without saying the word charity. And not very many people, but I did notice some people got mad at me that I tweeted as if he just like gone to play golf, which was not my intention. I had assumed it was for charity. That's not what was relayed to me, but I had assumed it was for charity, and indeed it was. Like the way it was framed to me is that he's missing for a reason that makes sense, and it was a golf event. And I thought the word event got that across. But they were like, yeah, Reef just hates Kyle Rudolph, and he's just trying to say that he's gone off to play golf. And so some people might have taken it that way and gotten mad at Rudolph. Some people took it that way and got mad at me. That one was just weird. But yeah, I mean, so sometimes players just miss because of reasons that totally make sense and we don't really know. And normally we get to ask. But the situation at OTAs is not like it was in previous years.
And Arif just hates athletic tight ends, so you're just
That's it.
You're just gonna have to deal with that too. Ryan also asks, can you make any wild conjectures about the special teams yet? We have 5 open specialist / return spots. Do we go young relatively at punter? Who can figure out the mystical art of punt returning?
There is no young at punter. The only other punter on the roster is the rookie Zach Von Rosenberg, and he's 30. He's a 30-year-old rookie.
Every punter in the NFL is like the oldest. Like when they were teenagers, they were like the oldest teenagers in the world. Like they are old souls. These punters.
God, Zach Von Rosenberg's birthday is like 3 years to the day of my birthday. I'm old too, I guess. But I think Britton Colquitt is like Is he the same? Are they the same age? No, he's 6 years older. Wow. Okay, Britton Colquitt is good. Yeah, there's no young at punter. But
That this has been a Reeves getting old corner.
I'm old. But no, the kickers are young. I'll say that. There's Riley Patterson, rookie from Syracuse, and I. It's just minicamp, but man, he was not making his kicks at minicamp. My money's on Greg Joseph, the kicker from Florida Atlantic. He's been in the league for like 3-4 years. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, so that's my hot take is that I've already got my kicker selected. It's Greg Joseph. I saw like 6 kicks in camp. I'm good. Yeah, in the undrafted free agent long snapper, I'm going to say he doesn't have a shot either. So that's my hot take. Kick return. I don't see a spot for KJ Osborne on the roster. They seem to be doing their best to try and not have him. It seems to be kind of just like a thing where they're comfortable saying, hey, if we don't have any kick returners, that's not a position that you can just make up. We saw what happened when Mike Hughes tried to return kicks. So KJ Osborne is going to be the guy if we don't have any kick returners. But we'll try to be in a situation where we cannot possibly say that about ourselves. So we'll re-sign Amir Abdullah. We'll draft Amir Smith-Marset. We'll draft Kenny Nwangu. We'll make sure we have as many kick returners as possible. I'm sure Blake Prohl can return kicks too. We've got, we'll see if Dan Chisnick can return kicks. I don't know. But yeah, they've got as many kick returners as possible. So I think my take is that KJ Osborne doesn't make the roster because they're trying to make sure that he doesn't. And then the Amir Abdullah one is interesting because he can return punts. He hasn't very much recently. But the punt return job is between like him, KJ Osborne, and Chad Beebe, unless Smith-Marset, Kenny Nwangu, maybe Blake Prohl, unless they are, they get to audition for that role and one of them figures out how to return punts. And that distinction is important. It is much, much more difficult to field a punt than it is to field a kick. And athletically, they tend to be different profiles, punt return and kick returner. There are obviously a lot of athletes that did both because they're not so radically different that you can't do both. But even the ones that do both tend to be better at one than the other, right? Like Devin Hester, much better punt returner than he was a kick returner. Cordell Patterson, they didn't even ask him to field punts, right? I think Percy Harvin fielded punts for a very short period of time, but the Vikings had Marcus Sherrill, so you never had to worry about it. But he was a better kick returner. So, yeah, I think they'll try and figure out which one of these guys can also return punts. But it's a very talented group at kick returner, at least in terms of what their college production was. And I don't really see a room for KJ Osborne on the roster.
Raul asks, how good is this defense without Hunter? Can any of these corners rush the quarterback? Without Hunter, do you imagine more blitzing?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's going to be blitzing, right? Like I think that without Hunter, they're going to try and find ways to bring 5. The Vikings tend to blitz a lot less than average. If you take a look at what their fronts look like on third down, it looks like a very blitz-heavy team. If you take a look at the percentage of times they send 5 or more players, it's below league average. It's like 22%. Whereas like the Ravens and the Steelers and I think the Chargers were at the top at like near 40%, just nuts how often they blitzed on passing downs. But yeah, I could see them blitz a little bit more often. Obviously, Anthony Barr would be part of that equation. Henderson Smith would be part of that equation. Patrick Peterson might be part of that equation. You're much more likely to blitz from the nickel than you are from the outside cornerback spot. So that we probably don't see a ton with Patrick Peterson there. And I don't really think of Mackenzie Alexander as like a blitzing corner like Mike Hilton. So we'll kind of see how creative those blitzes can get. But I would imagine without Danielle Hunter, I mean, they saw kind of what that pressure did. I think they'd be more comfortable blitzing. But the thing is, they're very clearly building a team that's going to be much better in zone coverage than in man coverage. Patrick Peterson has lost a step. He does not seem like a man coverage corner anymore. From my understanding, Bashad Breeland has done a little bit better in zone coverage than he has in man coverage, despite the fact that he's played well deep. I think, we've seen some good stuff from Cameron Dancer in man coverage, but I think, with the speed concerns coming out of the pro day, even though he ran a theoretical 4.3 out of the pro day, I mean, coming out of the combine, you kind of have to wonder if that's somebody that you trust completely in man coverage. If Dantzler or if Gladney ends up playing for the Vikings this year, which I don't expect, but if he does, he's a bit more of a zone guy, and then Mackenzie Alexander you don't want in man coverage either. So they're building more of a zone team, and if that's the case, that kind of limits your blitzing options. I mean, the Vikings have done a lot of zone blitzing over the years, and they've matched the pattern match zone man coverage stuff with blitzes really well. But it does limit your ability to blitz. Like the Ravens and the Steelers are very, very comfortable with their man coverage, which is why they blitzed so often. So we'll see more blitzing. Probably not like so much that they jump to the top of the charts or anything like that. But obviously Hunter's pretty important to the team. But how good can the defense be if like everyone takes a step forward? If you get the most optimistic outcomes, if the Vikings are right about having 2 nose tackles, freeing up your ability to put more people in coverage on those downs. Cameron Dancer takes a step forward. Patrick Peterson rediscovers who he is. Harrison Smith continues to play like a top tier safety or recovers from the dip and play that he had last year. I think that defense can end up being very good. But I think it takes a lot to go right, and I don't think that there's kind of enough luck there for you to be able to get there without at least Daniil Hunter playing really, really well and playing for them. So the defense can be very good, but I think that it would just take a lot. So I think that Hunter is going to be pretty crucial to their plans going forward. I think that they're going to figure out a way to get that contract to work.
Yeah. Also from Raul, my sense is that we can know pretty quickly before any real games if a rookie will be good. Diggs is a good example. Do you agree? In contrast, I don't remember a lot of praise for Jefferson.
I don't really agree with this. A lot of the great rookies that we've seen from the Vikings / the bad rookies that we've seen from the Vikings have seemingly shown that pretty early on. So, for example, obviously Diggs, he received tons of praise as a rookie in camp before any games had started. I don't know that we saw that for, like, say, Anthony Barr, though, who had a really, really good rookie year despite kind of how people perceive him now, right? His rookie year and then even better the year after that. Were really excellent. But, in camp, you didn't necessarily see it. Like, yeah, Laquan Treadwell struggled as a rookie, so maybe, that was something you saw in camp. But I don't really think that generally you see that. Like, I think if you take a look at some of the guys that really have really good rookie years, Justin Jefferson, by the way, another really great example of that, they don't necessarily always show up in camp before games play as somebody that is easily identifiable as somebody that really, really stands out as somebody that needs to see the field right away. Yeah, I mean, like, a really good example is the Chiefs cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed, 4th round pick. I don't think they even intended to start him. I think they were forced to play him, and he ended up being one of the best rookie corners of last year. And I didn't read a ton of Chiefs coverage in like OTAs and minicamp or anything like that, but I don't recall that much praise being shifted his way. I don't think Raul is asking if you can tell if a player is going to be good over their career just from the first couple of snaps in camp, right? Otherwise, Xavier Rhodes, we would have thrown into the dustbin of history before he ended up being a top tier corner for a little bit. I think he's just asking, we'll know that they'll have a good rookie year. And I don't think that's the case. And I think the Justin Jefferson example is as instructive as the Stephon Diggs example is. Just that a really kind of, not, I shouldn't say mediocre because Jefferson wasn't notably bad in camp or anything like that, but like a really unnotable rookie performance in camp doesn't always tell us that player is going to have like a kind of a mediocre rookie campaign or anything like that. I disagree with that.
Next question is from Romeo, who asks, does Arif want to take back his Dalvin Tomlinson criticisms before it's too late?
I don't know. What does this mean? No. What's changed? That my take in March is still like, there's no new information. I don't know. No, I'm not going to take it back. Dalvin Tomlinson's a really good player. He just doesn't, I don't think the Vikings should have signed an additional nose tackle. I think if there was no nose tackle on the roster, I would have been over the moon about this signing. I think it's great value. I think he's a really good player. I don't think that, he's an effective 3 technique.
So no, then.
No, I'm not changing that. Look, if I took it back now, would I receive an ounce less of criticism in October when he's got like 4 sacks already or something? No. It wouldn't help me to be like, you're right. I'll take it back. No.
Yeah, not so much. Kyle asks, who's the third and long defensive line? I am concerned who is rushing besides 99.
It's probably Daniil Hunter. I'd say maybe Stephen Weatherly, unless like one of those rookies, the 3rd or 4th round pick, really pops off. But if not, I'd say it's Daniil Hunter, Stephen Weatherly, probably DJ Wanham on the inside, and I don't know, maybe Hercules Mataafa. I don't really see Jalen Holmes making the roster this year. I think he might get cut. So Hercules Mataafa or Jalen Twyman. And if Twyman is really sticking to the workout and nutrition schedule that the Vikings have set up for him, first of all, hopefully then he can get his number changed from 76. That's like an abomination. I want him to have a different number. But second, if he looks anything like he did when he actually played at Pitt in 2019, he would be a terror. But he fell to the 6th round for a reason. I've seen so many 6th round steals not pan out that I'm not going to like go overboard about how good he is or how good he could be. But there's a lot of potential to unlock, and it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if the 3rd down defensive line features Jalen Twyman a lot.
Next question is from Steezor. If Arif could change 3 and only 3 of the Vikings 2021 picks, who would he change?
So they're picking at the same spot, presumably. So I can't just like pick Justin Fields instead of Christian Darrisaw, I assume. Because that would be it, right? I think Justin Fields is the 2nd best quarterback in the draft. That one's interesting. I'd probably at least include one of the defensive ends. So when the Pitt guy was picked, what's his name again? It's not Janarius Robinson, it's the other one. But when the Pitt guy was picked, I was like, I don't really understand it. If I was going to pick a guy from Pitt, it'd be Rashad Weaver. And then that guy gets like arrested for Patrick Jones. That guy gets arrested for like domestic assault. So fine, he fell. Good. But I'd probably pick Ellerson Smith, the UNI guy. Like Doogie likes him because he's like from Minneapolis South. I couldn't really care less. I like him because he's a really great athlete that seems to have a good trajectory. He learned a lot. It's seemingly between his second to last year in college and his last year in college. So that I think would have been a better pick, Ellerson Smith over Patrick Jones. But he would have been available with the Janarius Robinson pick. So that's the one I switch. I like Cameron Bynum a lot. Like interpersonally, like I like interacting. The very few interactions we've had. I like the social media stuff that's been posted about him. So I can't say that I like hate the pick or anything like that, but maybe that's another one I would have changed. So I'm taking a look at the cornerbacks, or because he was a safety, but I'm taking a look at the cornerbacks that were drafted after him. And let's see, he's listed as a cornerback by Wikipedia, but yeah, he's a safety. Sean Wade, I think, he had a really bad year on the outside for Ohio State, and he was probably overhyped as a 1st round pick heading into the 2020 or heading into the 2021 season as a preseason guy. But I think he's probably a better pick there, especially if the Vikings were going to end up signing Patrick Peterson and Bashad Breeland, who are both more outside guys. I also like Zach McPherson, but he went like 2 picks earlier, so I can't really swap that pick. So that's probably number 2. After that, man, that one's tough. The Darrisaw one was like really difficult for me because the first viewings of film that I had of him were just like not wonderful. So it took me a while to get around to it, just because like I think I saw the Miami game first, and that's the one where he just kept on not finishing. As I think probably the Chaz Surratt pick, I actually don't think I like that pick at all. I like Monty Rice, who the Tennessee Titans picked, but I understand that he's just not a great fit. And maybe I would have picked Kendrick Green there, which would force the Vikings to pick somebody else, probably at 86, because they picked Wyatt Davis. So I don't get that one, but I don't get to change the Wyatt Davis pick. But I still, I think, would rather have had Kendrick Green and drafted 3 offensive linemen over Chaz Surratt. I really didn't love that pick. Maybe instead of picking a corner, I could have changed Cameron Bynum to like a different linebacker. Maybe Buddy Johnson's like the next linebacker picked. He's not that great. Maybe Tony Fields. He's kind of an interesting linebacker. But yeah, I think I'd probably change the Surratt pick to Kendrick Green.
Let's go to the Allen Robinson Liberation Front, who asks, last year, the Vikings ran out of 12 personnel at the 3rd highest rate in the league, and it was their 2nd most successful package of packages with more than 50 snaps. With Rudolph gone, do you think they will revert to more 11 and 21?
So this is kind of interesting because the Vikings are still better in 11 personnel than they are in 12 personnel. Like, I mean, I assume, I don't know where these statistics come from because there's a bunch of places that track it, like Sport Radar and PFF and Sports Info Solutions, and I think Warren Sharp does it, Sharp Football Analysis. So I don't know what definition of success rate is being used here, or if they mean success as in EPA or success as in yards per play or whatever. But generally speaking, they've been significantly better out of 11 personnel than 12 personnel. And those are basically the 2 decisions the Vikings really make. I mean, they could run 22 personnel enough to be 50 plus snaps of it, but it's a very kind of short yardage thing. Would they revert to more 11 and 21 personnel with Rudolph gone? I think without drafting a tight end that can play this year, like I don't expect the guy Zach Davidson. I don't expect him to even make the roster this year outright. I think he's a practice squad guy. I think without drafting a tight end that you can expect to play this year, there's a good likelihood of that. And I'm looking forward to it because the Vikings have just been better in 11 personnel than in 12 personnel. But we'll see because they really like what they saw out of Tyler Conklin at the end of last year. And I agree with that. I think that was really good and they probably want to put him on the field. So it would not shock me if they still were the league leaders in 12 personnel, because in 2020, they were number 3. And then in 2019, they were number 1 with like a bullet by like the Eagles were number 2 and they had every receiver on the roster injured at one point. Like the Vikings were in 3 tight end or 2 tight end more often than them. So yeah, I would expect it, but it wouldn't shock me if we didn't see as much as we would like.
Next question is from Nolan Kaler, who asks, for a Reef's cousin corner, not underlined, to be mistaken for the Cousins corner, what should be in Irv Smith's cousin's diet?
Well, not cousins.
Oh, cousin diet, yes.
Cousin diet.
I'm the one who mistook it.
So this story here references the fact that Irv Smith turned to his cousin, who recently graduated from Tulane University, as a dietitian, to reshape his body and do stuff. I don't know. I'm not a bodybuilder. From what I hear, chicken has a great protein to calorie ratio, so a lot of bodybuilders like chicken. I know that some people sometimes criticize that for the protein complex that gets included in chicken, so they recommend beef. I don't know, man. That's all words to me. Yeah, whatever works, man. I feel like nutrition and diet science is well behind a lot of other sciences, and that's not even the fault of dietitians or nutritionists necessarily, although the lack of accreditation for that does make it kind of difficult to find a good one. It's just because it's really tough to do nutrition studies in science, and you tend to do observational studies with enormous samples, which are just plagued with all these problems. So I don't know, man. Nutrition's tough. The only thing I know for sure is I should consume a lot less sugar. That's it. That's the one rule I have.
That's what you know. It's not what you do, but it's what you know.
Yeah, it's what I know. I've been eating less sugar, so I'll say that. Like I switched from, the Red Bull I drink. I switched to sugar free, and it's done wonders for me.
Oh, I'm sure that your body is happy to be dealing with the aspartame now, as opposed to the sugar that it was dealing with.
Well, hey, the carcinogenic effect of aspartame is minuscule. Minuscule.
All right.
99% of studies can't even find an effect. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, that's the only rule. It's the only thing I think I know about nutrition. Sugar's bad. Don't care about fat content. I don't count calories. And I was doing keto for a while. I'm sure Don's disappointed that I stopped. And that was like working for me, but I mean, that's a pretty radical diet change. So I don't really care to like recommend it very strongly.
Also from Nolan Kaler, for a Reef softball corner, what did he make of the Dukes upsetting number 1 Oklahoma, and what was the key to their success?
When was this question asked?
This was asked today.
Nolan, keep up. The Dukes, my Dukes, incredible Cinderella run in the World Series, the college softball World Series, but they did lose to Oklahoma twice. So they beat Oklahoma, the number 1 seed. So I think in May, they were like the 22nd ranked team in the coaches poll or the AP poll in college softball. But they make the tournament at the beginning of June. They beat Oklahoma right away. So they're seeded up against Oklahoma. They beat Oklahoma right away, but it's a double elimination tournament. You have to lose twice to be eliminated. So they beat the number 1 seed Oklahoma. They beat Oklahoma State, which I believe was like the number 5 seed. And then they play Oklahoma again. They lose to Oklahoma. Then they play Oklahoma once more. And so loser goes home in this one. And they lost to Oklahoma again. So Nolan, keep up. Oklahoma versus, I want to say it was Cal, I think, is in the final. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, it was an incredible run. It was remarkable. You take a look at the pitching that they put together, just phenomenal stuff. I mean, like even taking a look at just the scores in all the World Series games, even just that shows you the difference, right? Because like a lot of these scores in a lot of the other games, like 8-4, 10-3, 6-0, and in JMU games are like 2-1. Odyssey Alexander is clearly like one of the best pitchers in college women's softball. It's really incredible. JMU just recruits the best. I'm so proud.
Nothing but the best. Nothing but the best for your Dukes.
Nothing but the best for my Dukes.
Damian Barrett asks, how much do I need to pay for a stealth marketing spot on the show? I swear Manscaped got more mentions than they would have if they actually paid for an ad.
It sounds like you can't pay for ad space on Norse Code.
Yeah, it turns out we only do the free stuff. Also, how would James have fared in a match with Mayweather? After last night, I'm thinking he could easily go 8 rounds. I've read a number of people's reports of the fight. I didn't watch because I had better things to do. I've heard, I know, right? I have, however, heard that those who illegally streamed were like wanting their money back. Like,
okay, so that doesn't shock me that fight was bad. It also doesn't shock me that fight went along for a number of rounds, right? Because I don't know a ton about boxing. One of the few things I know is that Mayweather fights go a long time, even if he has an enormous advantage. Like when he went up against the MMA fighter, whatever his name is.
McGregor.
Yeah, McGregor. A lot of people put money on that being a short match, and it wasn't, right? That lasted quite a while because Mayweather's the perfect CompuBox boxer. According to people who watch boxing. Again, I don't know that much about boxing. And so he does a really great job of avoiding hits getting counted, right? Like a bunch of punches will land on his gloves or not count as blows. And so he'll rack up punches left and right that land and look great in a box, look great in the CompuBox scoring thing. And he doesn't really look for a knockout punch. So this fights last a long time. So yeah, I think James could last a while.
We had talked
very like Homer Simpson energy, right?
Well, yeah, we had talked pre-show about I saw the punch that people are saying actually knocked him out, and Mayweather like stood him up in order to like get him to
make the fight last longer. Yeah,
yeah. I would have crushed Mayweather and all of his bones if I would have fallen on top of him. So
yeah, you don't mean intentionally. You mean, yeah, I would have just fallen on top of him.
I would have fallen on top of him, and
a poor 5'8", 150-pound man.
soaking
Not
wet.
poor.
Yeah.
Screw him. But yeah, the 5'8", 150-pound man would have to bear the weight of a falling James Pagashnik.
That would not have gone well for him. No, that would have been pretty bad. Kenneth Allen asks, what was the best part of Iceland, and why did you come back?
I came back because there's no way I can make enough money in Iceland to sustain living there. Good Lord, what an expensive country. I haven't actually confirmed. I'll just do it right now. But we were trying to figure out, how to do Iceland, because it was like since lockdown, March 2020, we decided that whenever lockdown ended, we were going to want to leave the country. So we just kept saving up money. And as soon as, Iceland opened up, which was one of the first countries, luckily, because we always wanted to go to Iceland. As soon as Iceland opened up, we booked a flight, and we went through all the vaccine protocols and the testing protocols and what have you. And as we were preparing, we were like watching videos and reading guides on what to do in Iceland. And somebody said that the most expensive city in the world was Reykjavik, and I didn't check to see if that was true, right? Because it was just some random guide and it might not have been updated, or I don't know what measure they used or whatever. But it certainly felt true because I've been to New York, I've been to San Francisco, and man, Iceland just felt a lot more expensive. And it's not just because I was living in a hotel or whatever. Even just random purchases would anything but the Iceland hot dog was just crazy expensive. Okay, none of these websites list Reykjavik in anywhere in their top 10, so they're just probably just not complete because that city is nuts in terms of how expensive it is. But yeah, according to Iceland Mag, it's the 14th most expensive city in the world and the 6th most expensive city in Europe. Yeah, sure, maybe downtown is just way more expensive, but yeah, it was crazy expensive. But man, I had so much fun. Unsurprising, right? Went to an active volcano. It's it's one of the rare types of volcanoes. They're called a shield volcano. We saw eruptions, once every 6 to 8 minutes, and just these really active, movie classic eruptions. And you felt kind of one of those idiots in a disaster movie where you travel to the volcano and you sit on the mountain across from it.
Openly mock it.
Yeah, openly mock it, right? It's no big deal. We cracked a beer at the top of the mountain and drank a beer while watching the volcano, right? It was very, yeah, I'm sitting underneath the beam as the aliens take us into Independence Day moment. But I don't know, I had fun. By the way, I climbed a mountain. I didn't know I could do that. That's nuts. It wasn't hard. There was a trail. I was more hiked a mountain, but still, I didn't know I could do that either. But yeah, in fact, actually, so the mountain we went to, so we had to get to the top of this mountain to see the volcano, which had actually started in a valley and then grew to take over the whole valley. That mountain, by the end of that week that we were, the first week we were there, so we were there for 9 days. By the end of that week, that mountain was made inaccessible by the amount of magma. The magma moves really fast, slowly enough that you could walk up to it and just hang out next to it the whole day and not have to worry, but fast enough that over the course of a week, it'll move enough to cut off paths, and the path is constantly changing about where you can see the volcano. And so the viewing point for the public moves back and back and back further away from the volcano. There's a time lapse over 2 months on YouTube of the volcano. It's beautiful, but you get to see it grow. You see the magma fields and stuff. We brought back magma rocks. We walked up to a magma, a lava field that had recently cooled. You could actually, if you put your hand on it, it still felt a little warm. But we walked right up to it, obviously close enough to put our hands on it. And then we grabbed some already broken off lava rocks. We brought them home. Which we asked the guide if that was okay, and she was like, "What? It's making more." And we're like, "Well, yeah, but who knows?
We
I don't know
just
if it's
want you to
okay.
say that it is okay. We want to be absolved from something if we have to
Yeah.
explain this later.
Right, exactly. Like come on. But like I wanted to make sure it was, and she was like, yeah, there's enough. Look. Which, like, I didn't need to be made to feel stupid, man. But okay. No, it was a ton of fun. Actually, the guide was great. She told us all kinds of great stuff. But yeah, that was great. The Blue Lagoon is the spa that's on top of like a geothermal like hot spring. And they go like the whole 9 yards in terms of like I had a whole body exfoliation and mask and then a massage, and man, this is the cleanest I've ever felt in my life. It was amazing. I felt so good. We went to another lagoon, like just a glacier lagoon. It's like it's got to be one of the only countries in the world where like you watch a volcano and then like 4 miles away you're hiking on top of a glacier. It's nuts. It's crazy. And then in between are these lava fields where like where because the lava had recently, and by recently I mean over the past 1,000 years, had recently crushed everything that was there and had taken over that land. There's no grass there. There's almost no vegetation at all, but this moss that grows on the lava. It takes like 50 years for the first little tiny bits of moss to be detectable, 100 years to even like interact with the moss. This moss had grown on it, and it's like a protected species in Iceland, but they used to just like hike on it. And like when one of the guys was telling us that like her grandmother like farmed outside of Reykjavik and was like a 2-day hike away, and would and would on her like treks to Reykjavik would camp out at night by sleeping directly on top of the moss because it was so cushiony. Really cool, but it looked kind of like Death Stranding. Like it was just nuts. But there's like these great, like, they cut down all the trees, so they're planting all these trees. So these great man-made forests that look beautiful. We were at a crater lake that was like a kilometer wide. Just an insane country. Just like every geologic activity on the planet is like concentrated in Iceland. So that was cool. Also, we ate some really good food.
Let's go to Kyle Slaby, who wants to infuriate me.
Sure.
Kyle Slaby asks, after a massive windfall last week, I am hooked on bingo.
Go, Kyle.
My wife and I are going to a local bingo game on our 6th anniversary. Can't think of a worse way.
Sounds romantic. That's great.
I think I can think of a worse way to spend a 6th anniversary, but this is right up there with just, calling it off. Kyle says, when picking boards, we play 2 or 3 at a time. Do you suggest avoiding doubling up numbers for coverage or syncing up for higher risk strats?
Well, I mean, this is right in your wheelhouse, right? Because you had that book.
The book I have refused to open. Yes, on my that got sent to me.
Because you already know everything in it.
Yeah, about that, Kyle. Find a better hobby. Dusty decided to come to Grand Forks for a couple of days, and I ended up catching up with him one night. We played a lot of blackjack, and we're quite successful at it. So maybe look into something other than bingo people. As a side note, when I was talking to the gaming person who was working that night, she'd been working there for 10 years. I asked her, had the bingo people gotten any better?
The bingo people gotten any better?
Had they tipped more? Are they still fighting? All this stuff. Her reaction? Are they to the tipping more? Hell no, they're not tipping more. I proceeded to tell her that I was explaining on my podcast that I had this hatred of the bingo people and the fights they were causing and all that. It's just as bad as it's ever been. Like, and what's new is they stare down the new people even more.
Oh, wow.
So,
by the way, Iceland, the most recent data shows that Iceland is the 3rd most expensive country in the world. So that makes sense now.
That's rough. Logan asks, Arif's child rearing corner. Help. My 8-year-old consistently wakes up at 5 a.m. Oh, he's got a CEO on him. That's what we used to call the kid.
That's right.
We used to call the kid who would wake up at 5 a.m. That's your CEO right there. He's got the newspaper. He's ready to go.
Yeah.
What can I do to get him to sleep longer? Also, he likes biting things, especially people. And I'm worried he is getting a taste for human flesh. How do I prevent him from becoming a cannibal like James's step kid? Not kid.
Kid. The question says kid.
Yeah, I'm not claiming blood on that one.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to embrace the 5 a.m. thing. I'm sorry. As for the cannibal thing, you probably should not embrace that, but
Just for the sake of argument.
I just want to make it clear that I'm saying you're gonna have to live with the one thing, at least for a little while. He's 8 months and kids change, right? But the second thing, I'm just gonna defer to James, who will clearly have to learn from his mistakes, having raised one cannibal. Maybe you can tell us where you went wrong so that Logan can avoid it.
Well, first things first, as far as the question about sleeping, you can look at two different ways. You can either let him stay up a little bit later, which sounds like death, or you can get blackout curtains to help with that, or you can try to wear him out a little bit longer. But or adjust like when his nap schedule is. But if he's waking up at 5 a.m., one of you two is going to wake up at 5 a.m.
You'll get a head start on your day. You get to attack the day.
That is too bad for that family. I was lucky. My son came by his love of sleep honestly, and that was the only kid I ever had to deal with as far as night stuff. And there had been a few like kind of questionable nights of sleep, but people shot off fireworks next to his window when he was a little kid and nothing. So he's I was lucky. He always wanted to sleep. So Nick Howard asks, my wife dropped a bomb on me this past weekend. We are expecting our second child sometime in February or March of next year. My question is, any advice for raising multiple children, and how would you go about making the announcement since we have not told our child yet? He is 3. First things first, anything after one child is a Ponzi scheme. This is just terrible idea. Don't do it.
One child is a treasure. 2 is a Ponzi scheme.
Well, there's this line from a comedian by the name of Daniel Sloss, and he said, "You could tell my parents slowly but surely became disenfranchised with the idea of having more children because they'd say, we were blessed with Michael, we were gifted Daniel, we were diagnosed." with Cindy, like it just slowly becomes a thing. My question actually involves your math because if I'm doing the 9-month thing here, either you just found out or this isn't real. So over the 9-month thing.
Goodness.
So I'm also just as a side note, if you just and for the people listening, if you find yourself in a position where you find out that that you and your significant other are pregnant, or she is pregnant and you are along for the ride, however you want to take that, don't tell anybody for the first 3 months. Just don't. It's bad form. But this has been James's
form.
This has been James's math corner. But as far as telling the kid,
math for the purposes of figuring out when people bone.
That was
Great
not
math.
it. We talked about this on pre-show. I was trying to figure out if I needed to yell at them about talking about being pregnant within the first 6 weeks or within the first 3 months or something. So I'm just throwing that out there. But still, telling the other kid, use a balloon. They're 3. Just pop a balloon. Or give them a balloon, pop a balloon, and have there be like confetti in it or something. They can't read. So I was never in a situation where I had to say to the kid that we were having a second kid. So I don't actually have any, I don't have anything to lean on here. It's just, just use balloons.
The kid's going to find out when the kid finds out.
Yeah, use a balloon. He's 3. Don from Ohio asks, does Breland signing give the Vikings an extra victory this year, or do they need to pick up an extra defensive lineman or wide receiver to do this?
Yeah, sure, a wide receiver. Why not? I don't know.
Confident.
I don't think there's any 4th string corner that gives you half a win, though. That's tough.
Also, Don from Ohio asks, do you walk away from the blackjack table if certain players don't follow the unwritten blackjack rules, such as hit on anything under 16 if the dealer's showing 7 or higher, etc.? Also, what other table games do you play?
Would you walk I probably wouldn't.
I have walked away from tables, and I don't, this is not to say I gamble often. I don't. This is gambling with Dusty the other night, and we did well. I think Dusty took care of his Dusty was betting more than I was. I took care of my bar tab,
Not a shock.
and yeah, I took care of my bar tab, and Dusty took care of his airplane like tickets. I was an excellent wheel on the table. I was making everybody money that day. It was. I've never played better blackjack. I've never been that lucky, and I've never seen a dealer who got less blackjacks in the couple hours we were playing. So just as that, but I have walked away from tables where dude was playing terribly, was inconsistent, was hitting on stuff that was ruining it for the rest of the table. Blackjack can be a team sport. It doesn't have to be like a full-on team sport, but the role of the wheel at the person at the very end of the table, the last person before the dealer, is important. And if that wheel is terrible, you should get up and leave. You should absolutely move your business to another table or another bar at that point. It isn't necessarily a team sport, but you can play it as such if you want to if everybody is trying to make money on it. Like, there is a certain amount of selfishness, but like if you have somebody there who's looking at it and going, well, I need this 10 more than they do, or like they don't like recognize that there's more things that are worth 10 in the shoe, in the thing of cards.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't recognize there's more things that have 10s in them than anything else, like if they keep wondering why they keep busting, like they're hitting 12 when the dealer is showing 14.
At that point, it is a question of like math, then, right?
Yeah.
Because hopefully the shoe has enough decks of cards in it that it really doesn't matter that they keep generating 10s.
No, but
right?
but terrible play is an absolutely perfect reason to walk the hell away. And I have walked away from that. It's ridiculous. I don't tend to be like the world's greatest blackjack player. I dealt for a while. I recognize patterns, and I recognize when the dealer is like absolutely destroying you. And that is a wonderful time to get up and leave. You're like, I just lost $40 in one shoe. I need to go away now because this is my amount that I took out that I was expecting to lose tonight. Fine. So no, I would absolutely walk away from the table. Absolutely. Let's go to the legal corner for Arif. Say a certain person is you hate is coming to your state in the future. Would it be legal, or screw ethical, to contact the TSA and let them know he is carrying a lamp made of cocaine? I mean,
a lamp.
It's possible he is carrying it.
If you have reason to believe that this person is carrying a lamp made of cocaine, my understanding of the law, and of course, Arif's legal corner disclaimer: Arif is not a lawyer and also does not have a legal corner. Normal legal corner disclaimer is if you've got a good reason to believe, if a reasonable person would believe based on the evidence that you have that this person is carrying a lamp made of cocaine, that tip would be legal. My understanding also is that if you don't, that tip is probably illegal, like a false report. But if it's an anonymous tip, it's probably difficult for them to track you. I would still make this tip from like a payphone or something, though. If do those still exist? They've got it. Wait,
I have seen 2 of them in the state of North Dakota.
Well, that's North Dakota.
Well, I'm saying I have seen 2 of them out there. So like,
grab a burner phone to make a tip. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah,
that's terrible. Well, that's going to be the end of this episode, and hopefully I'm not going to...
Not a lawyer. I want to clarify I'm not a lawyer. I just want to put this out here. Just don't follow my advice.
For the record, Arif...
Actually, on any of this, on any of the corners, don't follow any... I'm not a parent either. I don't keep any bees.
Bees. Arif's bee racism corner.
Okay, I am exposing the racism of the other elements of beekeeping culture. That's not me, that's them.
That is just the sort of thing a bee racist would say.
Oh my god.
All right, well, that's gonna be
okay, my defense literally was I am saying what everybody's thinking, wasn't it?
That's congratulations, you're just making it worse. All right, well, that's gonna be the end of this episode of Norse Code. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Yeah, well, I haven't written anything while I was on vacation, so No, my next thing is probably going to be a national piece. We'll see how that goes. I am going to write some observations from OTAs if there are any observations worth writing about. And of course, that's going to be on Wednesdays. So that article is either going live Wednesday night or Thursday morning. And of course, you can find that at The Athletic, theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan.
All right, that is going to be it for this episode. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember to punch reality right in the face. And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at BigMono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.